So hey everyone, welcome back to the session. Sorry for the slight delay of a minute or two on my end. All right, so let's continue ahead and go from where we left off. All right. So I hope you're all able to hear me properly and see the screen as usual.
Yep, I can see it.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. So yeah, let's get started. Now, moving ahead to the next point. Um, Based on what we have just taken a look at, the next thing that we're going to start to work on is trying to work around these data types and seeing how we can play around with them or how we can work around with them because these form the basics of everything else that we will do within Python when we start to work on it. I'll just close these directories, no longer required. There we go. So to the point that these are going to be the basics on top of which we're going to perform all the other operations. That is, these data types are on top of which we do the other operations essentially. So let's start with the first one. Now, when we start with these data types or when we start with these variables to begin with, there are a few things in Python that we can do unlike other languages. For example, if you want to assign values for two variables, you can write a comma b equals 5 comma a plus 1. Or let me not make it complicated to begin with. Let me just do this. A comma b equals 5 comma 6. And I'm just going to print to avoid this. What I can do here is just use IC of a comma b. Let's use ice cream for a while to make it easy. So you can just see it prints the value of a is 5 and the value of b is 6. And this is where it helps it easy for us to debug a program, right? You don't have to worry about printing the name of the variable or so on. You just print the variable and it prints the value. However, it's not quite the same because within ice cream, you need to, let's say, sometimes print line number as well, line number and file number and so on to get to know in which line you're printing the same variable. Let's assume you might be printing same variable multiple times. So that's one scenario that might happen constantly. So that's something we will focus on when we will look at ahead in time. But for now, let's not worry about it in detail. Let's just take a look at this for now. Right. So yeah, you can assign values to variables like this. A will be given the first value and B will be given the second value. I'm so sorry if someone had unmuted and yeah, you can feel free to ask any query if you would like to after unmuting. Please feel free to do that. Right. Don't have to hesitate. You can just interrupt me at any point of time and ask any question that you might have in your mind. So please feel free to do that. Let's just make one small change. I'm going to write it as 5 comma a plus 1 and let's try this out. Before this, I want to make sure that we don't have these variables used anywhere else in the current program. So I'm going to make it x comma y and I'll make it x plus 1. Yes. Now, here's what's going to happen. By default, Python will take all the right-hand side values and calculate them first before storing it in the left-hand side values. So you cannot do this where you can write 5 comma x plus 1 are going to be stored in x comma y in such a way that first 5 is stored in x. And then since you have the value of x as 5, take x plus 1 and then store it in y. We cannot do this specifically because the way Python works is it calculates all the right-hand side components first, all the right-hand side values first, and then assigns the result of them to the left-hand side variables. That's how it works in short. Now, moving on to the next part. Now, so sorry for the slight delay. Yeah, with this understood, let's go on to the next part of this. A lot of things when we work around, or a lot of functions or operations when we work around with respect to variables, is to use these variables across certain functions. There's a common theme where we end up using the same variables in multiple places. And for us to figure that out, we need to first learn the logic of functions and so on. So we'll get into that ahead in time. But prior to that, let's start to take a look at a few important things on the basic level. Now, I want to create just a very simple function to perform the following. Let's create a simple function, or a simple logic rather. Let's say I just want to enter um, the year I was born in and calculate my age in years. Let's not complicate it. I just want to enter the year I was born in and I want to calculate what my age is. To do this, you need to interact with your program. To interact with your program, we have a specific function here called input. Input is an inbuilt function in which you can enter some input statement or enter some input prompt, and you can type in anything you want on the console or the command prompt window. And whatever you enter will be stored in a variable within Python. So if I write here, enter the year you were born in, and I will magically guess your age. So it's a fairly sarcastic problem, but let's try to work around this. And I'm going to store this in a variable called age, and I'm just going to print age. So this is all that we're trying to do. We're just going to ask user, enter the year that you were born in. We're going to store the result of this input in a variable called age, and we're just going to perform IC of age. Now, the moment I run this program, it's going to ask me, and it's going to run till line 29. And in line 29, it's going to pause and ask me, what is the age I was born in? So let's enter that. The age I was born in is, let's say, sorry, enter the year that you were born in, not age. Please ignore that. So it just says enter the year that you were born in. I'm just going to, let's say 2012, for instance. I'm not that young, but let's consider this for example. And we're just printing the value of age, which is 2012. Done. Now, in our example, let's try this out again. If I write 2012, it's just going to print the value on screen for me. Now, the simple thing I need to do is just subtract it from the current year to give whatever the age of that person is. So I'm just going to write age is, or let's say we have magically guessed your age in years as, all I have to do is just subtract this age with the current year, that is 2023 minus age. This is all that we need to do. Now, I just have to run this, type, let's say 2012. It should automatically give me a response saying 11 is the result, right? Unfortunately, here's the problem. You're going to get an error, and your error is going to look like this. And since this is our first error that we are looking at within Python together, let's take a look at it and understand what it means, because it's quite important for us to understand errors in detail. Let's take a look at that. The first thing you get to see here is which is the file name in which that error occurred. The file name is intro.py. So this is the file name in which the error occurred. And in this file name, the error occurred in line number 30. So let's go to line number 30. This is the line that we have. This is where the error occurred. And this is the line that the error occurred in. And let's take a look at what error that is. Whenever you look at Python, the way errors are specified or the way errors are written here are in the following manner. Errors are written specifically with the kind of error that you face. The kind of error you face is going to be written in capitalized words without any spaces. These are called exceptions, which we'll take a look at ahead in detail. Let's not worry too much about it. But this is the name or the type of error that we see here. The type of error we see here is called a type error. Now, it's important for us to understand what kind of error it is in order to solve it. So we have a type error. That means there's a data type mismatch. The data type mismatch here is there's an unsupported operand type for int and string. And let's see what is the operand or what is the operation we're doing. We're doing only one operation, that is subtraction. So in subtraction, I have 2023 minus age. Now what this says is there's an unsupported operand type for int and string. Now we know 2023 is an int for sure. We don't have any quotations within it. We absolutely know this is an integer. Since this is an integer, then this age, whatever we got as the value, must be a string, which is why we are facing this error. And let's see if that is true. To understand that, let's just hover our mouse over input function. You can see input function has a default return value as string. You can see the way it says, read a string from standard input. This means no matter what you type, no matter what you enter within the number, or no matter what you type in the console, it's going to read it as string by default. That's how input works. So what I need to do is take this string variable. You can see the moment I hover over string, it says hover over age. It says age is a string variable. Now, with this idea, we can get to know and understand that age is a string variable, which is why we cannot perform subtraction between a string and a number, and I need to convert the string into an integer. So let's try doing that. To convert a string into integer, I'm just going to have to write age equals, and remember, this is where all the data type names that we have learned earlier becomes quite useful. If we remember the data type names, let me just remove all of this. So back to this. If you remember the data types, that is, it was a class, right? A class called int, a class called float, and so on. All these class names exactly have to be used in order to convert them. So if I want to convert age into an integer, I just have to wrap it within a function called int. That's it. If it's something that can be converted to a number from a string, this int wrapper will automatically convert it to the number format. So we don't have to do it manually, or we don't have to worry about it, and we can use it as an integer. So let's see if we are able to do that. So I'm just going to write here age equals int of age, and let's try running it now. I'm just going to write 2012 again, and it's going to execute this. Now that age is converted to an integer, if you see, variable age is now identified as an int. It is no longer identified as a string. In line 29, when you hover over it, it identifies it as a string because input by default returns string. But in line 30, after we have converted, age is identified as an integer because any variable you have, once you wrap it around a class, it gets converted to this class if it is convertible to that class. That is, if it is convertible. If you're unable to convert it to a number, it's going to give you an error like we saw before. Previously, we saw type error. Here, if I write hello, for instance, it's going to give you a value error. The value for that data type cannot be converted. So this is how we can see different kinds of error that we might encounter over time. Now, to make it easier, input is returning a string. That string, we are then converting it into an integer, and that integer is what we are using here. To avoid this task of two lines, what I can do here is just wrap whatever input function is returning within an integer. This means input function is going to return a string, as we know. Once it returns a string, let's say once input function is executed, it's going to return a string like 2023. That string is converted to an integer and stored in the variable age. Once it is stored in the variable age, it's directly an integer and we can directly perform this. So we don't need an additional line of code ahead of it. That's gonna be the advantage when we look at this. Right, with this understood, let's see if it works as expected. I'm gonna give the age, or sorry, year as 2023 again, and it says, oh yeah, 2023 is the current year. So it says we have magically guessed your age in years as 0. Basically, this is the whole idea of how you perform typecasting. This is how you perform conversion of data type or conversion of data type for a variable from one data type to another. And we are able to convert, let's say, a string to int, for example. You can do the other way around as well. Let's say age equals 2023. You can print string of age. It's going to convert 2023 into a string and you'll be able to print it. Though you're able to print it, it'll still show as 2023 only. You won't get to know. To get to know, you can print it as IC, which is going to show you the data type as well. And it's going to specifically show this in quotations. So you can see the moment I write string of age, it's going to say the function is string of age. This is what you're executing. And this is the output. The output is in double quotes, which indicates that it's a string. Just a basic concept that we need to know in terms of conversion between different data types. If there are any queries, again, till now, if there are any queries at all so far, feel free to ask. Um, if there are no queries, we can move ahead to the next case. I'll just give you a few seconds to just work through this. So feel free to let me know if there are any queries at all. Right, so I presume we are good with this. All right. So yeah, let's move ahead to the next case. Again, just to point out to all the participants, just so that we are all at the same understanding. If you feel that I'm going through a lot of details that you already know, that you already are aware of, you guys can let me know if you all feel that this is something we are well aware of and we want to skip these. However, if you feel like this is faster than usual when it comes to pacing of the content, you can let me know in that case as well. And any queries in between, feel free to interrupt, feel free to ask. Um, Please don't hesitate. Right. Anyway, let's quickly move ahead from this. Now that we have got a basic understanding of Python and its data types, let's go ahead and create a new file and only work on strings, because strings is a class that has a lot of functionality within it. String has a huge amount of inbuilt functions and a huge amount of specific operations that you can do within them, which we will do a lot of times over time. So let's start to look into those in detail and let's start to learn them. But before that, there was one thing that I focused upon, and I don't think I pointed out specifically why that happened. Let me see. I might have deleted all the data type content of this. Okay, but yeah, so now that we have known and understood it, this should be fine enough. One important thing that I pointed out, if I write a equals 5 and b equals 5, and I print ID of a and ID of b, and if you run it, you see ID of a. Okay, so let's see, we're printing at the last. Oh, I'm so sorry. This has to be done after this logic. So to avoid writing age again and again, I'm going to comment this whole section. So to comment a series of lines, you can just select them and press Control and slash together. It's going to comment all these lines together. So you don't have to manually do them for multiple lines. With this, let me just run the same code again. And you can see that the ID of A and ID of B are same. It's 928 and 928. This is one thing that we recently saw. ID of A and B are the same, though there are two different variables. Just so we understand this, this is because when you create a variable A whose value is 5, A will get some memory location that ends with 928 and will store a value 5 in it. When you create another variable B with the value of 5, B will not create another variable because the values are same. To save memory, B will also point to the same memory location. A will also point to the same memory location. This is why the ID of A and B will be the same to begin with, which we see by the inbuilt ID function. However, here's the problem. In our case, I want them to be different because if I modify B, it should not affect A. If I modify A, it should not affect B. Python takes care of this internally for basic variables. For some complex variables, we have to worry about it and work around it in different ways, which is why I'm pointing this out now. That's because if I write after these two statements, A equals 5, B equals 5, both will point to the same location. And if I write B equals B plus 1, now B is pointing to 6. 6 is not the same as 5. And if I modify it here, it'll A will lose its value. To avoid that, Python implicitly does the following. If you change the value of B, it's just going to give B a separate location and give it a value of 6. It could be something like 960 or so, could end somewhere else. This is how it essentially works. This is for basic variables of simple data types. However, when we go to data structures over in the future, this becomes slightly more complicated, and we will look into that in detail, and we will try to understand how to make sure that both don't point to the same location and we lose one of the data. That's one thing we will look at in the future. For now, you can think of it like this to begin with. So I'll just modify B and print the ID again, so we can take a look at that. Let's write B equals 6, and I'm going to print ID of A and B again. If you run this, it's going to give you ID of A and B, which are same at the beginning because both have the value 5. But the second time around, A will have the ID 928, but B will have the ID 960, which are different. So just one small part of logic for us to observe. Yeah, that's basically the whole idea of it. I hope this idea of IDs is pretty clear. Um, of course, it doesn't make sense for us to remember IDs if Python automatically changes it, but it does not change it for all kinds of variables. That's something we will see ahead in time. We will work around it and try to figure out how that happens ahead in time. Right. Now, moving ahead, let's go on to the next case. Right. So prior to that, if there are any queries so far or till now, please feel free to let me know. I'll just answer your queries right away. If there are no queries, we can move ahead to the next part.
I have a question. I'm unable to install libraries or modules. I'm getting a certificate error. I'm guessing Hanover is blocking that. Is anybody else having that issue? I was unable to install ice cream or NumPy.
I'm experiencing the same issue.
Yeah, I believe this is one issue that was faced by the previous batch of participants as well. There is Hanover has these restrictions where I believe you're using the virtual machine, if I'm not wrong, at Nick and Baron.
I'm on my desktop. I have a VM, but I've been doing everything on my desktop.
Yeah, desktop as well.
All right. So I guess it could be something related to the network and so on within this Hanover security system because it's pretty much been the same issue that your previous batch had also faced. So one request is if you can reach out to anybody who can help you overcome this so that you can install a few packages. I would be happy to list out the packages in advance in case if you will not be able to install it, but they need to provide some access to install certain packages. I can provide these access in prior so that you should be able to do that as well. That is the list of packages.
That would be great. Yeah, I'll put a ticket in as soon as I get those.
Absolutely. So I'll probably share that during the lunch break to avoid the time taken during my session. I hope that is all right with you.
Yep, that works.
Right. Also, alternatively, if you would like to utilize the packages that I have directly, there's one way you can do that. Um, Within your environment,